Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it is time for a super special video. As you know, this week we are going through some constructed formats and talking about the best new Ravnica Allegiance card, and today is Modern Day, and I'm joined today by Crim. How's it going, Crim?
Hey Seth, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm pretty excited to talk some Modern. Modern is normally my favorite format. It goes up and down when Standard gets new cards and stuff, but in general, Modern's my favorite format, and I'm excited to talk about some super spicy new cards from Ravnica Allegiance. So before we jump into it, Grim, gotta ask you, how good of a set do you think Ravnica Allegiance is for Modern in general? We see some sets have like a lot of impact, some sets really honestly have almost no impact on Modern. Where do you think that Ravnica Allegiance falls in that scale?
I think Ravnica Allegiances does have a few things to offer, for Modern. It's not completely, I think there's a good amount of cards here, actually. It's in the enchantment form, though. I think a lot of the cards that I personally like are going to be around enchantments.
Yeah, I think it's a set that it has, for me, a lot of potential. There's several cards that when I see them, I'm like, all right, this might be able to do something really sweet, but they're also kind of like high upside, high downside cards. It's also possible that once we actually start building and playing with these cards, that we find out, all right, well, that looked good on paper, but it's actually not working out as good in practice as I would have liked it to. So I think there's potential, I think, of some new decks developing based on Ravnica Allegiance cards, but then there's also a chance that those decks end up just not being as good as the decks that we already have in the format and kind of fall by the wayside. So it's going to make it interesting to talk about these cards, I think. So let's jump into our top 10 list, and we're starting off with one of my favorite cards from the set, number 10, Biomancer's Familiar. It's a card that's got a lot of text on it. The adapt text, ignore that. It's not relevant to Modern. The reason this card excites me for Modern is it's basically a Training Grounds, and Training Grounds is a card that is right on the cusp of allowing for some really sweet combo decks, but just hasn't quite gotten over the edge. And I'm excited for the potential of not only a additional Training Grounds in the format, so you can play 8 instead of just 4, but the fact that it's a creature-based Training Grounds in the format. But what do you think, Grim? Is there any potential for Biomancer's Familiar in the Modern format?
I think there can be potential, but once again, it is a creature. I think that, like, obviously the dice removal argument isn't exactly the best one, but it's just like more so like at 2 mana, it's just a 2/2, right? And then we start doing stuff the next turn. And sometimes like I want to, it has to have a crazy upside. So I'm not too hot on Biomancer's Familiar, but it does seem like it could be fun having an additional Training Grounds. Maybe like elves can, I don't know, have an additional way to like make Azuri's activation cheaper, or Elvish Archdruid or something like that.
I think for me, where I'm most excited for this card is there are some game-ending infinite combos with Training Grounds. One of the most simple ones involves making Eldrazi Displacers blink activation, only cost a single mana. And then if you can blink Nest Invader, you have infinite enter and leave the battlefield triggers, or there's, oh man, the 4-mana Eldrazi that makes 2 Scion tokens. Basically blinking various Eldrazi, you can generate infinite mana, or you can get infinite bolster triggers with Anafenza, but if you go through some of these loops. So while I don't know if it'll work out, and being creature, it's like a double-edged sword. On one hand, it does die to removal. Training Grounds dodges a lot of removal being an enchantment, but on the other hand, you can tutor it up, which is a kind of a meaningful upside, because most of these creature combo decks, like you see the Vizier Druid combo decks, they're playing Court of Calling, they're playing Collected Companies. You can do something very similar with Biomancer's Familiar in just going infinite with 2 or 3 specific creatures. So while the downside of dying is a thing, the upside of being very tutorable and like incidentally tutorable by cards that you already want to be playing, like Collected Company, kind of makes it an upside in some ways compared to being an enchantment as well. So this is one of those cards like I was talking about in the intro. There's probably a 10% chance that it actually takes off and works out and is like a legitimate tier deck in Modern, and a 90% chance that it doesn't work out. But that 10% didn't exist before Ravnica Allegiance came around, and it really excites me for that reason.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to see what you'll definitely be brewing with this.
We will be playing it, I can promise you that. Well, let's move on to number 9. And number 9 is like the opposite of Biomancer's Familiar. You don't have the I'm going to make a whole new deck upside, but you have this very consistent floor in Skewer the Critics, which is basically another bolt. How many lightning bolts does the Modern format need, Grim?
Apparently more. So this is definitely like the debate is, so we know what this is going in, right? It's going in Burn. The question is, what are they dropping for it? What does this take over for? And is it that much more of an upgrade over something that already exists in Burn? That's the question. I like it. I like it though, but I just don't know. What is it an upgrade over?
That is the tough question. So my initial take on it is that Burn decks might consider cutting some of their more expensive Burn. Burn is a deck that wants to be as efficient as possible. And we used to see like Flames of the Blood Hand at one point was in the deck, and the deck managed to cut like all of its 3 mana stuff. So now it's all just 1 and 2 mana. Maybe Skewer the Critics allows it to cut like Lightning Helix, Boros Charm, although Boros Charm deals 4 damage. So maybe it's a chance that it can make the deck more efficient by getting rid of a more expensive card, because Burn does want as many cheap plays as possible. So I don't know. I think it's definitely something, from talking to like really good Burn players, is up for debate, and it's certainly in the conversation. And the people that know Burn better than anyone else, like Patrick Sullivan, it's a card that's on their radar, and depending on the meta and how their brews turn out, this could definitely be part of it. But then maybe it's just like the 61st card in Burn, and it just barely misses out too.
It feels like it could be the 61st card, but it does have some sweet potential, as you mentioned, because, you know, if the deck wants cheaper spells, that's great. But this is at sorcery speed too, because the huge appeal also of a lot of the Burn cards is that you can fire off multiple spells at the end of an opponent's turn, stuff like that. I mean, like Lava Spike is just, it's a 1 mana deal 3, right, at sorcery, and this would be kind of like that, but you'd have to Spectacle. So that means like this one wouldn't pair as well if it's like, example, you go Swift Spear. You can go Swift Spear Lava Spike, but like this one, not as much, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You would need to get in that damage before you can actually cast it. So I do also like that it gets around Chalice. I've found some hilarious upside in Wizard's Lightning beating Chalice decks in Modern, because it's technically 3 mana. So that's like a little bit of fringe upside there as well, but...
Yeah, there's definitely some fringe upside, but it seems cool. I like it. I mean, it's just, that's the question, and I haven't figured it out yet. So, and maybe that's up to like players like Patrick Sullivan and other more experienced Burn players to do. So.
Yeah, I'm more the dies to burn side of things than the plays burn. So
I'm right there.
All right, let's move on. Number 8 on our list, we have a new Planeswalker, Kaya Orzhov Usurper. And this is one of the weirdest Planeswalkers I think I've seen in my entire life. And it's a Planeswalker that I think might be better suited for Modern than for Standard. But Crim, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Kaya does in Modern?
Well, okay, so I think that Kaya is like you said, a lot better it's better the older the format we go, right? I mean, if it's -1, exile target non-land permanent is sweet. I mean, non-land permanent with mana cost 1 or less is sweet. It's +1 is exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. You gain 2 life if at least 1 creature card was exiled this way. And like, I try not to evaluate the ultimate too much, because, you know, ultimate, like a Planeswalker needs to be good before it ults. And so, like the +1, there's a lot of things that, you know, Modern, there's a lot of cards that get dumped in the yard between, like, you know, Faithless Lootings and stuff like that. So just like, I know it's sorcery speed, but it then makes it so that your opponent is forced to play their turn where they fire it off the exact same turn they used it. So like maybe they'd have to go turn 4, play Faithless Looting, and then immediately flash it back so you don't get value out of exiling it. There's a lot of Phoenix decks. So now you can do something as simple as, trigger Revolt, Fatal Push at the end of their turn or after combat. And then, on your turn, that's when you can exile it from their graveyard and gain 2 life. And then the minus is huge because you get to exile things like Grafdigger's Cage, Death Shadow, all those things. So being the isolate ability being on a planeswalker is very isolations or whatever the card is really sweet.
Isolate.
Is it isolate? Yep. Yeah, it's isolate, right? Okay. Yeah, like it's sweet because it's on a planeswalker, and it's only a -1, and it has a lot of targets in modern. The exiling a mana cost 1 or less is huge in modern. Mox Opals. It's not just 1, it's 1 or less, which is why it's sweet. So it's even better than isolate. Cause I think isolate's only, right? Only 1 drop?
I think it's exactly 1. I would have to reread it, but I think it's only converted mana cost 1.
Exactly. So like this being able to hit 1 or less means that it can hit a Mox Opal, which is huge. I mean, unless of course it gets banned or something, but I mean I like this. And then of course the ult, at that point, there's enough things exiled, then sure, you're probably winning. Although I feel like I'm more so, it's more appealing to use the +1 and -1 than the ult on Kaya.
Yeah, I don't know I guess I can imagine a scenario where your opponent's at a low enough life total where it just wins, and then sure, you do it, but it doesn't seem like the reason to play the card. The reason you play Kaya is basically what you've been saying. We're in a modern format right now where people with a straight face are playing Rest in Pieces and Surgicals in the main deck, so Graveyard Hate, it's pretty good. It's pretty good with all the Dredge decks, Phoenix decks, even just incidental, like getting rid of Snapcaster targets, Faithless Looting. So many decks are using the graveyard to some extent. The exiling 2 cards, it's actually pretty good in modern. And then the negative one, as you said, Mox Opals, Chalice of the Voids, Death Shadows, Goblin Guides. It's an efficient format. Even Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarchs, almost every deck is playing 1-drops. So while neither of the abilities are like brokenly powerful by any means, or kind of like utility abilities, the fact that it's going to do something in pretty much every matchup between the plus and the -1 abilities maybe puts Kaya in the conversation. It is like a Rest in Peace that can also maybe eventually win you the game, or like this removal spell that maybe sometimes that you do ultimate and wins the game. So I don't know if anyone will main deck Kaya, but it seems like it's at least a reasonable sideboard option for modern.
Yeah, I'm going to try it at FNM for sure out of the sideboard. I'll try it on Moto out of the sideboard. I can't wait to see what, cause I play Esper, so I'm excited to see how this does in modern.
Well, let's move on. Number 7 on our list, and this is one of my single favorite cards for modern from Ravnica Allegiance, Electrodominance, and for this one, we gotta go back to Biomancer's Familiar. This is a card that it's either going to be broken and make brand new decks in the modern format. I think it has the highest potential to just be literally broken in modern, or it's not going to work out and it's going to do nothing. So, Electrodominance, Crim, what are your thoughts on this one in modern?
It's exactly like you said. It's weird. It's either going to be absurdly broken or just fall off to the wayside immediately. Because the thing is, right now, what are some big things you can do with it? Like get an Ancestral Visions off of it, Living In, Restore Balance, like all the suspend cards, right?
That's the main thing people are hyped for, is the no mana cost suspend cards, yeah.
Right. Okay, so the 0 cost no mana cards, like those ones are always interesting. But I don't know, I'm not in the camp exactly to just load my deck up with a bunch of things that don't do, like, that take like 50 turns to do stuff if I don't have Electrodominance, you know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, it's nice that I can get an AV off, but I'm trying to think of, like, are there any other applications with the card?
No. Nope. It's pretty much either cheating suspend cards into play or it's doing, nothing in modern. I mean, I guess you can cast it as a really bad Banefire type effect to deal damage to something, but you're not playing this in modern to deal damage to something. You're paying it to be 2 red mana, play Restore Balance or Living End or Wheel of Fate. I think my argument for it working is a lot of times we see these unique effects that are powerful, but they don't quite work because we only have 4 copies of the card in our deck. And if you only have 4 copies, your deck is going to be inconsistent. I call this the Heartless Summoning problem. Heartless Summoning, if you've ever played Heartless Summoning, if you have a Heartless Summoning on turn 2, it's like you're playing the best deck in Modern. But then all the other games, when you don't have Heartless Summoning, you're playing like Worm Coils on turn 6 and you're dead before you cast anything. We kind of have this with As Foretold. So As Foretold is another cheap way that you can cheat those suspend cards into play. Now that we have Electrodominance 2, I'm excited for the fact that we essentially have 8 2 or 3 mana ways to play Living End, Restore Balance, Wheel of Fate for free. So I'm hoping that redundancy is what pushes it over the top and allows those new decks to develop. Maybe it's still not good enough and it still could definitely be too inconsistent, but I think that there's a chance with Electrodominance and As Foretold, we see some new decks in Modern.
I definitely can see those two, like those two would definitely go together, right? Like the As Foretold and the Electrodominance. But my question is the payoff.
Oh, Restore Balance is great.
It is. That card is great. That card is great. But so then you have like 12, 8 cards, right, to help you cast that pretty quickly. But then you have those 4, so you have 12 cards in your deck that are like, I guess, pretty solid. And then what else are we doing with the other? I assume maybe let's say they play 24 lands, right? So then we have like we have a chunk of the deck still left, right? So then what is the left? What's left? It's a lot of air. You can play AV to try to draw into more. So you go like Jeskai, right?
Yeah. I wonder if you just play them all, like Living End, Restore Balance, Ancestor, all the free cards, just free card tribal.
Just free card tribal. Okay. I mean, it could be fun. I would like to see what it, like how it plays out. Like Greater Gargadon, right? Doesn't that, for every time a permanent, I gotta read Greater Gargadon again.
You gotta sack permanents for Gargadon. There is a suspend card that triggers whenever a permanent your opponent controls goes to the graveyard or something. Nihilith, I think it is, but
I guess, right? we can like try to make it so that they.
Well, I definitely plan on trying it. I'm hyped to try it. I definitely fully admit that it could not work out and be bad, but it's got me excited to give it a shot in Modern at least.
Oh yeah. It's worth a shot. I mean, that's what I'd like to see. I can't wait to see what comes out of it. And at least see what you try to do with it. I'm always excited.
Well, let's move on to number 6 on our list. And this is one that you put on the list. And honestly, I hadn't even really considered this card for Modern. Theater of Horrors. So, Crim, why don't you take charge on this one? Because I honestly hadn't even considered it.
This card, Theater of Horrors, it doesn't look like much at first, but I've seen Outpost Siege played at a point in time. I've recently just saw at Magic Fest, Oakland. I just recently saw Experimental Frenzy get played. So this is 1 mana cheaper and we get to play with our hand still. On top of that, you could bring this out of the sideboard against, with Jund decks, whatever. Maybe, this is another thing that burn decks can add to their sideboard to bring in to play the long game. And it also deals, for 4 mana, you can deal 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. So it itself will trigger the, spectacle if you need to trigger Spectral, but it just deals 1 damage. So it's just a sweet sideboard card advantage engine that you could be playing out of random, decks. You could play it out of Burn. You could try it out of Jund. It's just overall, it seems powerful. It seems very, very powerful.
It does seem good in certain matchups now that you talk about it, especially against the slower, more controlling decks, preferably ones that are not playing Assassin's Trophy or cards like that can deal with it easily. But if you can slip this in against blue-white control or Jeskai control, over the long game where your opponent's trying to dirtle, that card advantage is going to be a really big deal. So maybe this is an option for those matchups. When I first saw it, I was like, well, why would I ever play this over Phyrexian Arena? But you're also not losing life. And I definitely have played Phyrexian Arena decks where I kind of kill myself or get very close to killing myself because that damage adds up if the game goes really long. So maybe there is a spot for Theater of Horrors. It's kind of a unique idea, at least.
Yeah, and then like, even if they have Assassin's Trophy, that's, you're stretching their answer, like their answer's thin here, right? Because they're using Assassin's Trophy on other stuff too, right?
And you get a land out of the deal, so
yeah.
Score. Ramp. It's like a ramp.
Sweet.
It's a ramp card. It's a Rakdos Giant Growth.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is, a Rakdos Giant Growth. That's why I play it.
Let's move on to number 5 on our list, and I want your opinion on this one, Crib. Prime Speaker Vanasphere. This is the first deck I'm going to play in Modern once the cards come on Magic Online. Do you think there's a chance that our new creature birthing pod is going to shake up the format, or is the hype around the card for naught?
It still seems fun. Whether or not it makes it's not going to be pod, right? Because this has summoning sicknesses where birthing pod didn't. Yeah. So but it doesn't matter because this card seems like so much fun. Maybe you build the plan differently though, right? I mean, you build the plan to where you also protect Prime Speaker Vanasphere now. Before, it's like, yeah, pod comes onto the board. You don't really have to worry about protecting it too much because, what you didn't have to worry, it's an artifact. The only thing you had to worry about was maybe a Stony Silence effect or something, or some kind of random, shatter effect. But here, you do have to worry about, there is a lot of removal. There's a lot of ways to kill this, but the payoff for this seems like it could be a lot of fun. So maybe you go a little heavier on Protect the Vanasphere game plan in Modern?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely could play Blossoming Defense type effects, ways to specifically protect creatures, or counterspell type effects. 4 toughness is a little bit of an upside. At least you dodge Lightning Bolt, Skewer the critics, if that becomes a thing. I think the power of this card is, it's pretty easy if you build your deck around it, where if you untap with Prime Speaker and literally any other creature on the battlefield, there are loops where the end result is you just win the game. So the payoff is there, and it doesn't actually take that many slots out of your deck, because you can play a lot of the combo pieces as 1 or 2 ofs and still have slots to play utility cards or a fair game plan if you don't have your Prime Speaker. So the power is certainly there. The creature thing is the biggest issue, in having to theoretically wait a turn to untap unless you have a way to give it haste. So I think you're right that protecting it is really key, but I definitely expect people to try it because it is almost inconsequential to win the game if you untap with a Prime Speaker.
Yeah, untapping with this card, that's gonna feel good, right? That's gonna feel good.
It's gonna be, for us, not for our opponents so much.
I mean, yes. Exactly. I mean, you can then you untap, then you get to the Kiki Jiki combo.
The loops are pretty hilarious. I think if you start at 1-drop, say you have Prime Speaker and a Birds of Paradise, you could sack the birds, get a Scrib Ranger. Scrib Ranger untaps Prime Speaker. Then you sack the Scrib Ranger to get Renegade Rallier, which gets back the Scrib Ranger. Then you Scrib Ranger untap Prime Speaker. Then you could get Deceiver Exarch to get Prime Speaker, and then you get a Breaching Hippocamps untapping Prime Speaker, and then eventually at the end of that you end up with infinite creatures thanks to Kiki Jiki. There's so many super cool loops. So I can't wait to try it. Birthing Pod was really cool. This does feel like a safer Birthing Pod being on a creature. Like you said, part of the power with Pod was it was an artifact, so it dodged a lot of removal. Prime Speaker does die to everything, so I don't think it's going to be broken to the same extent of Birthing Pod, but I really do think there's a chance that it develops into at least one of the huge group of 40 playable decks that you can play in Modern. There's so many playable decks, and I think Prime Speaker might be enough to find its way onto the list.
I mean, if we got the Splinter Twin Light plan in Felidar, Guardian, and Saheeli Rai, I definitely could see a Pod Light game plan also, right?
Very, very true. I've definitely gotten killed by Saheeli Rai in Modern. That is a thing that happens. The list of things you can die to in Modern is very long and very, very varied. There's a lot of different weird combos that kill people.
Yep. You will die to a lot of random things in Modern, and sometimes that's just the way it happens.
Well, let's move on to number 4 on our list. And here we have maybe a way to keep you from dying to your opponent's stuff. Tithe Taker, kind of a nice little taxing afterlife card. What do you think of this one, Crib?
So the upsides to this card are that it's not legendary, right? So that you can play multiples and it would stack. It has afterlife. That's great. It's a human, which is always nice to see in the types. The downsides are, once again, just, it's during your turn, right? And it's nice that it's one-sided. That's another, like, pro on it. But the con is that it's only on your turn. It doesn't change the fact that, you know, your opponent can still, like, do a board wipe or something on turn 4. And then, like, the only thing but it does have afterlife, so I guess you leave a bunch of 1/1s back anyways, but they're not humans anymore. I like the card, and I'm trying to figure out what deck it can go in. And the first thing is, like, people would say is humans, but what are you dropping from humans? And of course, after that is maybe death and taxes. I still play Moto and still see, like, Eldrazi and taxes. So, maybe that one?
Yeah, I mean, it does have a taxing effect. I'm not 100% sure what we're hating on with this card. That's kind of my concern. Like, the abilities, they're powerful. Like, the taxing effect is powerful. The afterlife is definitely a nice upside, but it's one of those cards where I'm not sure directly what deck or even specific card this is, like, game breaking against. Like, against, like, Thalia, you want that against spell-based combo, or different cards like that are good in specific matchups or groups of matchups. I'm not really, outside of maybe, like, Lantern Control, which I guess can play main phase if they want to, I can't think of any, like, one deck where it's like, oh my god, our opponent has Tithe Taker, I can't win the game now.
It's pretty sweet against blue-white X decks. I mean, path costing 2. That's Settle
true.
the Wreckage gets pushed back to 5. And then Coco out of the Spirits decks, like, becomes 5.
That's true. I mean, I guess you do make your opponent play at inconvenient times. Like, it is definitely worse to have to main phase your Coco or whatever. So there is some upside there. And I mean, I guess a 2/1 that leaves behind a 1/1 flyer when it dies, it's not a bad deal just based on that. So maybe there's a chance there, especially when you throw the human subtype into it.
Yeah. That's the fact that it's human is is usually a huge factor. It's always worth taking at least a look at it if it says human.
Well, let's move on to number 3 on our list, and we have pretty much a hate card that seems to be more or less designed for Modern in Cindervines. So our new Gruul enchantment, and Crim. What do you want to do with this one?
Well, I want to bring it in against KCI, see if I can. I mean, like, that's just one of them. And of course, any, like Storm deck too, like, you can bring it in against them. If you're playing Burn, this could be all the difference, right? I mean, like, you have Eidolon and this out of Burn. Like, whew, that's some damage you've got going on there. That's some damage you've got going on there for your opponent. And, you know, even the control matchups, as I mentioned, blue-white X, and just other random combo-y decks.
Yeah, I think in Modern, one of the challenges of the format is you only get 15 sideboard cards, and as we were talking about earlier, there's like 40 playable decks. So finding sideboard cards that do something in multiple matchups is really key. We've kind of seen this phenomena with Damping Sphere to some extent, where it's not a great Storm hate card, and it's not necessarily a game-ending Tron hate card, but it hits on 2 really big matchups, also KCI and other Storm-like decks, so that's enough to make it a really good sideboard option. And Cindervines is kind of the same way. It's not necessarily game-breaking against a deck like Storm or a deck like KCI. They do have ways that they can get it off the battlefield, but combine the fact that it's good against those decks with the fact that it's also good against your opponent playing Hardened Scales or Affinity, or even Tron, where Artifact Hate blowing up something can be relevant. In other artifact or enchantment based decks, like, the combination of doing something relevant in a whole bunch of matchups makes me pretty high on this card as a sideboard option when you already have, like, Destructive Revelries and other 2-mana artifact and enchantment destruction being played. If you have the mana to cast it, it seems like a strict upgrade over something like that, or like Seal of Primordium, which shows up on occasion or something.
Yeah, and once again, the fact that it like, the versatility is great, and, you know, we're already, as you mentioned, just playing the Destructive Revelries for, like, 1 mana more, essentially. You could have something, a Destructive Revelry at any point you want. It sits there and it just continues to ping, right? Whereas, like, sometimes you'll have a Destructive Revelry out of the Burn deck and it just has no targets. So you just sit there holding it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything.
And the damage, I mean, it adds up. This is one of the new style hate cards that only hates on the opponent. So unlike Eidolon, where I've definitely had burn opponents that die because they don't manage their Eidolon well and they like end up locking themselves out of casting spells, Cindervines all upside. Like, it's never gonna hurt you, so.
Yeah. And it's still cheap. It's still 2 mana. And so that's why it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, I think I expect to see this in sideboard cards of a lot of decks that can cast it. Like, if you're in green and red, I expect this to definitely at least be in the conversation for your sideboard slots.
Agreed.
Let's move on to number 2 on our list. We have Lavinia Azorius Renegade. I think one of the first cards that actually slipped out of the set and was previewed, and I think people have forgotten about it a little bit because we've been talking about all the more recent cards to come out, but this card's pretty powerful, especially in older formats. So, Crim, what does this one do in Modern?
Well, this one is going to be great against Tron. You're gonna be able to make it so that even though they have Tron there, they only have 3 lands. So that means you can't cast spells more than you have lands, right? Because what it is whenever each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. And then Lavinia also says whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So, that means Karn, a non-creature spell, will now not have to come down at a normal like when they have 7 lands. They can still cast creature spells, so they still can go and play like a Worm Coil or something like that. But I'd rather see a Worm Coil than a turn 3 Karn or a turn 4 Ugin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Those are the scary draws from Tron. The Planeswalkers make them super scary. It does seem really good against Tron. Also, the counter the spells if no mana was if no mana was spent to cast it is kind of an interesting option as well against certain things. In a weird way, it kind of hates on Hollow One if your opponent's trying to cast it for free. It also hits on cascade effects if your opponent's Living End, Restore Balancing, Bloodbraid Elfing, and cascading into spells. That's another nice option there. So it's another one of those cards that kind of hits on multiple things. And this is a card that I think is very much in the conversation for the humans deck. I don't think it'd be a 4 of. I don't even know if it would be a main deck card, but I think that it might do enough and fits enough with the humans like taxing, weird, annoying game plan that this might be a card that wants to come in against those decks.
Yep. And it's just super sweet to see that it's also there's even a discussion of possibly bring it in out of the sideboard of some control decks because it's also a clock, oddly enough. Yeah. I mean, I've won with a Snapcaster, so I definitely see this being a 2/2. That's just a strict upgrade. It hits them. It means that Nature's Claim can't hit this. That's relevant. That's very relevant. Almost any deck that can play a Nature's Claim plays 4 of them. And this goes around that.
The other possibility I really like about this card is maybe a little bit more restrained build of humans. I think one of the drawbacks of humans is by being 5 colors and having to play lands to support 5 colors, you don't get to play as many real spells. You pretty much have to play almost all creatures, or I guess like you can play Ether Vial because it's colorless, but with Caverns and sometimes Ancient Ziggurats and all those lands, it's hard to cast real spells. With Lavinia, you have this nice base of like Lavinia, Meddling Mage, Champion of the Perilous, Thalia's Lieutenant, Thalia, where you could play like a blue-white human stack or a Bant human stack and go 3 colors and be able to actually cast real non-human spells in your deck. So I'm excited to see if maybe that's the direction that humans can go, at least as like a alternate build of humans in the format, in part because Lavinia gives another good, like hateful style humans card in blue and white.
Yeah. And just like you said, because like sometimes you just watch humans like get blown out because they don't have the vial and they just lose to like a Blood Moon.
Yeah. Yes, I'm usually the Blood Moon player. I love those games.
Yep. Would you know a thing or two about that, or maybe 10, Seth, about Blood Mooning people?
All right, let's move on. Number 1 on our list, Pteramander. Crim, how would you say that? I think it's just
Pteramander, right? I think the P would be silent because it wouldn't be a pterodactyl, right? Or maybe it would
I
be.
guess.
But whatever. I don't think it is, but yeah.
Whatever. The blue thing. It's like a Delver of Secrets. What do you think of this one?
This card is very sweet. It's got a lot of potential because first off, it's 1 mana. I like that. And then it has flying, so it has evasion. It's just a friendly 1/1. But the thing here is its ability. It is 7 generic and a blue, adapt 4, so it'd become a 5/5. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each instant sorcery card in the graveyard. Now, Modern is filled with cheap, very cheap ways to just throw away cards, get them all into the yard, and then just like randomly by turn 3, after like enough thought scours and whatnot, you'll be able, you'll have like a surplus of cards, right? This could be a flying Gurmag. So let's just say it's a 2 mana. Let's say it could be 2 mana, right? It's a 2 mana 5/5. I think it's really good.
Yeah. I think that the thing that excites me about this card is it seems like it can naturally slot into some things that we already have going on. Like the decks that are winning with Arclight Phoenix, for example, are naturally doing what Pteramander wants, like just getting a ton of spells in the graveyard with Faithless Lootings and Manamorphoses and Thought Scours and cheap cantrips and gut shots. Like there's so many ridiculous cheap spells that there's decks that could just be like, all right, I'm going to play 4 of these, and it's usually going to be 2 mana, and it's usually going to be really big. So it doesn't need, unlike some of the other cards we've talked about, Electrodominance or Prime Speaker, you don't got to build a whole new deck to make this card work. You can just slot it into decks that are already really good in the format, and it will probably be really good in those.
Yeah. Now it makes it so like the only thing that it would still be painful to have to pay 8 mana for this if you play against like a Rest in Peace. But just like you said, it's just like, it slots right in. It's such a sweet card because of that. And these decks are already playing, like the Phoenix deck is playing Gutshot. It's a free spell. So the yards will be filling up pretty quick.
Yeah, I was worried about the Rest in Peace, Land of the Void stuff at first, but then the decks that are playing this are also most likely playing a bunch of Rest in Pieces. I'm sorry, not Rest in Pieces, Faithless Looting. So if you do run into the matchups where it's bad, it doesn't seem that hard to loot it away and not have it be an 8 mana 5/5 or 9 mana 5/5.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think this card's going to be good. We'll see. I think people underrated like Gurmag Angler and Tasker when they came out for the Modern format, and I think this might be similar. People are looking at it as similar to those cards, and I would not be surprised to see people trying this right away in Modern, and I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it's pretty good. Like, if you can have this be a 5/5 by turn 3, even in Modern, thanks to flying in specific, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, we were like, for a while, people were willing to try Tombstalker. Right?
Yeah.
This one requires a little bit more, I guess, about, would you say it's more or about the same build up to get to?
I think it's probably maybe a little bit more because it doesn't trigger off fetch lands don't help, so I think it might be a little bit harder. But you also get the big upside compared to the Delve cards that you're leaving cards in your graveyard. Like, one of the downsides of Delve cards is those cards are gone now, and if you want to cast a Bedlam Reveler, or you have a bunch of Arclight Phoenixes, or you got a Snapcaster Mage, like, you got this like tension where, do I exile these cards that I might want later for another purpose to get down my big Delve threat, or do I leave them in the graveyard? Pteramander it does both. Like, you still have those cards for Snapcaster and Bedlam Revelers, and you still have this big threat. So I think while it's harder than a Tombstalker to turn on, the upside probably makes it a lot better than Tombstalker.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then it's also the game of chicken that you have to play. Am I going to adapt now or am I going to wait? But it seems like it's going to be definitely better than a Tombstalker.
The other interesting thing is the way Adapt works, I think you can activate it multiple times if it hasn't resolved.
Yep.
So if you go to activate and your opponent's like, all right, adapt on the stack, Lightning Bolt your Pteramander, you'd be like, all right, well, 1 more mana, I'll do it again. It's a 5/5. Sorry, Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's why I think this card is sweet.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 modern cards from Ravnica Allegiance. So, Crib, thanks for hanging out. It's been a blast. Fun to talk about these cards.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for watching. So, this has been our top 10 list for modern from Ravnica Allegiance. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day. And this is the crew signing out. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.